Now we have a new atmosphere. So people watching the video are going to think it was like a stage shot or something.
Yeah.
You know, it was like superimposed on the class. But really, the truth is that it's such a good atmosphere for learning Torah, and the Torah is more able to seep in to the person when the neshama is opened, and there's nothing like nature that really opens up the neshama. So, therefore, thanks to Elisheva for opening up her home.
My pleasure, anytime.
For Torah, and it should be a good sign that the home should be filled with spiritual things, ruchnius, and it should give strength to the family. So say Mishnichnas Adar Marbin B'Simcha, like when Adar comes, we increase our joy, and in the service of Hashem, joy is actually a very serious thing. And we take our simcha quite seriously. You know, when it comes to the mitzvah of being joyous on the Yom Tov, the Torah commands, V'samachta b'chagecha, that you should be happy in the Yom Tov. So the sages say that really means like very simple and baseline happiness. So therefore the sages say, well, what makes people happy? So for men it's the meat and the wine, and for women it's the new clothes for Yom Tov, and for children it's treats. And so therefore the Torah begins what we would call simchas haguf, very basic happiness of the body. So therefore that the person should be in the proper state of simcha, that from there a person can have a more elevated one. You know, Rav Nachman was very serious about the simcha, and to his Hasidim who were really striving always spiritually, and really in a sense pushing themselves to greater expectations, that a person can very likely fall to a place of upsetness and frustration, because you're pushing yourself to a greater expectation. And so therefore he always spoke about simcha, and that even doing what he called mila d'shtusa, silly things, very important for a person to attain and to maintain the simcha. And the reason is because simcha is really a necessary state of being for the inner spiritual life, for avodas Hashem. Not as a goal in its end, or to be happy means in an external material way, but simcha is a ruchnius thing. Is a spiritual state, and that spiritual state, a state of being of simcha, is absolutely necessary for a person to advance, to go forward in avodas Hashem, the inner spiritual life. You take a mashal, a parable of like a body, and a healthy body has the blood flowing to and from the heart to the other parts of the body without obstructions. And whenever you have an obstruction in the guf, in the body, so there's going to bring about some ailment, something is not right, and it will bring about some challenge to the body. So it's a good mashal, a good parable for simcha, because simcha is also like a state of being able to, in a sense, to flow. And there are many and serious obstructions to that simcha, that necessary state of being that keeps a person from movement in the avodas Hashem, or the inner spiritual life. So today I wanted to take us a little deep into some of the major obstructions to simcha, and to get familiar with them, so that we have a strong familiarity with them, so that when we experience them, we're on more familiar footing, and have a way to approach and grapple with it. So the first obstruction to simcha is a midah, nature we call da'aga, worry. Now, in the Sfarim, the Sefer Chasidus and other Sfarim, they speak about these things on a deep level. Da'aga, worry, is a pretty serious thing. In the Sefer Tanya, when he speaks about the four major elements that is spoken about, water, air, fire, earth, he says, in the person, afar, the element of afar, dirt, the midah that's related to that is atzvus and atzlus, sadness and lethargy. Just like earth is something that's stationary and keeps a person, it's just is. The nature of sadness and the nature of lethargy is that it creates within the person, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, a certain stoppage. Da'aga is in that category also. When a person worries, it's in the same category. And therefore in the Torah, in the Avodas Hashem, that is really ra. It's ra. It's ra. Bad. In other words, our relationship to worry is, it's not so good. I really shouldn't worry. It's not healthy for me. It really doesn't do me any good. From the Torah's perspective, da'aga is ra. It's ra, just like any other ra that's there. Da'aga is ra, and it sits along with atzvus and atzlus, sadness and lethargy. In other words, the same components of stoppage. And what happens when you talk about worry is the person basically cycles through continuously some worry, some concern about an outcome that they don't know what's going to be. And what it does to the person is it keeps you in place. It prevents you from movement. And therefore it's very similar to lethargy, that a person is tired and doesn't have movement, physical movement, or atzva, sadness, so the person doesn't have motivation and energy. Da'aga, the same characteristics. The worry keeps the person in that place. In the physical way, being able to really be energetic, in an emotional way, and a spiritual way, being able to have forward movement, forward progress. So the first source I wanted to share with you is about da'aga, about worry. And it comes from the Sefer Sidur Shel Shabbos. This is the Sefer. Sidur Shel Shabbos is a wondrous Sefer written by Reb Chaim Chernovitzer. Lived in the 1800s. It's a whole Sefer on the Kedusha of Shabbos. It explores in very, very great depth on the level of the Kabbalah, but much more in line in the level of the Nefesh, the person, on the various movements of the Kedusha of Shabbos. And they say about Reb Chaim Chernovitzer that his whole essence was Shabbos. That was his whole being, Shabbos. And that on Shabbos itself, he was recognizably different. People could see that it was a completely different being. His whole stature was different. Even they say that his height seemed to be different on Shabbos. So he writes here in the first source on top. This is about Hadlakas Neros, lighting the candles. And he writes in the middle like this. That's where I put the bracket there on the top. He says, Vadai bidlikasan uveharasan. Certainly with the lighting and the illumination of the candles, misgarshin umistalkin ubarchin, kol klipos hachitzonim v'harav, etc. All forms of ra are expelled, are removed, flee. Asher b'veseinu, that are in our homes. In other words, the spiritual quality of the candles cause that all forms of Ra that sort of reside in the home in a spiritual way are expelled through the lighting of the candles. Now, where does this Ra, how does Ra get into your house? I mean, he didn't let it into your house. Right? You keep the doors closed and the locks on, so then the Ra doesn't get in your house. So he says, where does this Ra come from? Very simple. It comes from sadness and worry during the week. When you worry and you fall into a place of sadness, it's not just, it's not so good. That is a magnet for Ra. When Ra, that's for us. Ra sees that, there's a person that I could attach myself to. That's where I want to go. Ra draws itself to worry. It becomes a residence that for all sorts of bad fellows. So you turn around Friday afternoon, your house is full of thugs, and full of bad people. It's full of Ra. It's like, how did all these people get into my house? Well, the answer is it's from the worry. The nature of Ra is it lives in the place of sadness. It's the opposite of Kedusha, of holy things. It says there, Oz v'chedva b'mkomo, joy and strength are in his place with Hashem. Uveharasan, and therefore with the illuminating of the candles, meirin asabayis be'or shel simcha v'chedva Shabbos. It illuminates the house with the light of joy and the joy of Shabbos. So, it's not just, okay, well, it's not so good for me to be worried, I'm not happy. There's a spiritual effect of the mood and the state of the person. And the state of worry and its outcome, its neighbor, which is atzva, sadness, is that it brings all sorts of Ra. In other words, it sets into motion for a person to go to negative places and ultimately to do things of Ra. I'm not just talking about, things that are just sort of in your house. It means the person. When a person's in that state of da'aga, of worry, then it initiates all sorts of movement toward Ra, and that invites that Ra to come there. Because that mood, that state of being, is just ripe for the movement toward Ra. So therefore, the first obstruction that we speak about that keeps the flow of simcha, and the state of simcha, is the nature of da'aga, of worry. And therefore, the worry is a very serious thing in the state of being of the person and an obstruction to simcha. We have a pasuk in Mishlei that says, well, what do you do with worry? So Shlomo HaMelech tells us what to do with worry. He says, Da'aga b'leiv ish, if there's worry in a person's heart, yasichenu la'acherim, speak it out. Speak to another person. So this is ancient wisdom. That was Shlomo HaMelech understood way back, that if you have worries, a person has concerns, you have to speak it out. Now, what happens when you do that? So, I'll say, well, it's therapeutic. The person feels good. You can get advice, but actually, what's happening is you're really expelling worry. In other words, when a person speaks out the worry, instead of the worry cycling in them, just moving, I'm just worried about it, and the thoughts constantly go back to that place. Instead of that, you actually expel it. In other words, by speaking it out, what happens on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, is you're expelling the worry. So, you speak it out to another person. And that's helpful for many levels, as you said, the therapeutic, on advice, but also on being able to just remove it. But Rav Mordechai Zilber speaks about another being that worry could be spoken out to, that can alleviate that obstruction. So the second source I want to use here comes from this sefer called Divrei Torah. This is a contemporary sefer, and they've used it in the past. And this is Rav Mordechai Zilber of Stuchin, because he's such an incredible Rebbe, because he's able to draw the deep depth of Torah into contemporary times. So this is the second source, where it says, under the heading Tefillah Beino Levein Kono, on the right hand side. It says prayer between a person and his creator. The second to last line there. It says Hine Margish. Second to last line says Hine Margish Eza Ke'ev Lachatz B'Leiv. A person feels a certain pain or pressure in their heart. Umargish Tzarach Lishboch, and it moves to the top now. And they feel they want to pour out their heart to Hashem. O B'chlal Shemargish Ba'atzmo, or you feel in yourself, Shetzarach Lishtapich Lifnei Azulas, you want to pour out your heart to another person. Az lama lo lishtapich lifnei chaver? I mean, why just speak it out to a friend? You can do this to God. Certainly, when you pour out your heart to a good friend, the karov, someone is close to you, it benefits you. It's even better to do this before your Father in heaven. So the idea that we could speak out a worry or a concern to Hashem is another way for us to deal with da'aga. So he goes on like this, under the category Yitziras Kasher Hashem Yisbarach. V'hainu, this is like this: Sheyesh koach la'adam, a person has the power liyatzor Kasher Hashem Yisbarach, to make a bond with Hashem, make a kasher with Hashem. V'hadavar talib b'bechira, the matter depends on your choice. Ki misha mechapes liyatzor Kasher Hashem Yisbarach, someone that's seeking to make a bond with Hashem. Gam Hashem Yisbarach Yiskasher Imo, Hashem will bond with you. Ki kishayesh isarusa delasata, when you have an inspiration from below, ba isarusa del ela, you have an inspiration from above. It's a deeper idea in Ruchnius that there is a relationship between the human and the person, and the relationship is that it depends on the initiation of the person. When there is inspiration from below, it's met with a return from above. Hashem returns to the person that which they initiate. And therefore, if a person seeks out and makes the kasher with Hashem, in response, Hashem makes the bond with him. B'tzarach ladas, and you have to know, Hashem Yisbarach Hu HaYidid Hachi Karav L'Chol Yehudi, Hashem is the best friend to every Jew. Shlomo says in Mishlei, Re'acha, your friend, V'rei Avicha, and the friend of your father, Al Ta'azov, do not abandon. That's Hashem. And Hashem is called a friend. That's a whole class by itself, because we're not used to that idea. Hashem is a king, Hashem is a father, Hashem is a friend. And Hashem as a friend is the whole basis that you could speak to Hashem as a friend. In other words, it doesn't have that relationship of the servant to the master. That's different, of awe and reverence. It doesn't have that relationship of a child to the parent, which is a greater than and dependent, but a friend, in a sense like an equal. That there is an aspect of the relationship with Hashem, you speak to him like a friend. Hine yesh lecha reya yashen. And if, some of it, I'm sorry, is blurred out. But if you can just follow. You have an old friend. You have an old friend, from ancient times. Al tazniach yadidas, don't abandon the friendship. Also, you did sha'omar lecha, the very friend that says to you, Ahafti Eschem Amar Hashem, I have loved you, says Hashem. Va'omar lecha, and says to you, Sha'ata nechshav lo, you are considered to him, Achosi, Rayasi, Yonasi, Samasi, my sister, my friend, my dove, my twin. V'lo zaz milecha v'voscha, and Hashem does not leave you until He has called you. Every expression of belovedness, Hashem calls the Jew. Also of Zakin, that ancient father Kiviyachal. Osa alta gitte Freund, is an old good friend in Yiddish. Habori olam shaboroscha, the Creator that made you. Lama lo tishtadu liyatzur eza kasher ito. Why don't you make an effort to make a bond with him? So there's the invitation for friendship. Is there? He's an old friend to us. And therefore we're invited to make the friendship. And if we make the friendship with Hashem, in response Hashem becomes a good friend. Therefore, the way to make a kasher, a bond with a friend, is to talk to them, spend time with them, a lot of time. So we make our bond with Hashem, and we're told to, using the midos, the characters that person has. No, we're not told to do things that are beyond what people can do and how people normally relate. Only that we direct it to Hashem, not just to people. So we're using those characteristics and those ways of relationship, but to the Creator. So we have a friend, and you want to make a friendship, so you spend time with that person. You talk to them. Same thing with Hashem. Talk to Hashem. That's the way you make the relationship. Then when your friend's not there, talk to them. Call them on the phone. It's only through that can you make a strong bond. Same thing with making a bond with Hashem. Also with him we bond in a similar way. You have to increase conversation. To spend time. Only through that can you make a strong bond. Hine, Niklas Leza Koshi, you have a difficulty. Kach has a telephone with Tiskashalov. Take the phone and call him. Shvochas nafshecha lefnei Hashem Yisbarach. Pour out your heart to Hashem. Yesh lecha baya, you have a problem. Shata sovel megaiva, you feel you have too much arrogance. Shvoch es kol libchei love, pour out your heart to him. Ukamosha hayisa osa leish hachi karav elacha, like you would do to someone close to you. Harei leimcha hayisa medaber kain. To your mother you'd speak like this. No? Daber kain al Hashem Yisbarach. Speak like that to Hashem. Ki hu ohev ma'od l'shmo es kolcha. He very much loves to hear your voice. Umamtin alacha, and is waiting for you. Kamosha Kasav, like it says, Hashmi'ini es kolech, let me hear your voice. Ki kolech arev, because your voice is pleasant. Ani ohev ma'od l'shmo oscha medaber elai. I love very much to hear your voice speaking to me. Eini merachik oscha, I won't distance you. Adar, but the opposite. Kolech arev li umarech nava. Your voice is pleasant, your appearance is beautiful. Anna, please, tarbe ledaber elai. Increase your conversation with me. So, if Shlomo Melech tells us, you have a worry in the heart, speak it out to Hashem, speak it out to a friend, and that friend is Hashem. And in the same way that a person can remove the worry by speaking out to a friend, all the more so. That person can make that friendship with Hashem. And therefore, in light of what we're saying, you speak out that worry to Hashem. And you alleviate that worry from yourself through Him. Now, all the midos are very interrelated. So just like, for example, people that practice, like holistic medicine, so their view, as opposed to other forms of medicine, is that instead of focusing on the particular issue or the ailment, they try to see a much larger picture and the interconnectedness of things. So they understand that if there's an ailment or a difficulty here, what's the greater cause? Or how does it relate to the other parts of the person? So, in true Ruchnius, the tzaddikim looked at it in a similar way. Right? When they speak about any midah, particular midah, so always want to know what are the neighbors of that midah, what are the friends of that midah, what's the causes of that midah, because no midah stands alone. The Sfarim speak a lot about this, and that it's a whole. The midos are really a whole body, and the great tzaddikim, and specifically Rav Nachman, understood the interrelationship of midos so in an amazing way that it's like doctors, lahavdil doctors, that practice holistic medicine. So, one of the causes of da'aga, of worry, is really a lack of emunah. It's a lack of faith. And it's the emunah that Hashem is the master of the world and He controls all outcomes. Because the nature of da'aga is, there's something that hasn't happened yet, and I'm worried because I need to be able to control it, or I think I control it, and actually I do control it. I have to make sure it's controlled. And therefore, until it actually comes about, since you are responsible for controlling it, and you actually do control it, it better come out that way. And therefore, until the show happens, until you give the speech, until you're supposed to do whatever you're supposed to do, till you make the sale, since I'm the one that does it, and it hasn't happened yet, so therefore I worry. So therefore, tzaddik can teach us that da'aga is really the outcome of a frailty in emunah. And the outcome of emunah means bitachon, means the surety and that sense of peacefulness because you have emunah. So in light of this, when you talk about speaking it out to Hashem, it's not just speaking out the worry, but it really what it means is speaking out the emunah. In other words, to remove this obstruction means that when you talk to Hashem, you have to give over and give back the power to Hashem. And what we need to say to Hashem is, I don't control anything, and I'm not responsible for outcomes. My achrayus, my job is to do. And once I understand what I have to do, outcomes are yours. So when you do that, sometimes you're speaking out the worry, you're giving back the whole source of worry to Hashem. Because the source of the worry is a lack or a frailty in emunah. And therefore when you speak it out, and you speak out the bitachon, the surety, that emunah, that Hashem is the master, you take away the pressure of the responsibility of being responsible for the outcome, which is not our control. So therefore, da'aga, the worry, really means, Hashem, is to speak back the power of control to its real source. Okay, all these things are very major topics, and what to discuss and, of course, what to do. But let's talk about one more obstruction to simcha. And that is the final source here. The Torah says in Parshas Kedoshim, pasuk with seemingly subjects that are not related. It says, "Lo tisna es achicha b'levavecha." Don't hate your brother in your heart. Hocheach tochiach es amisacha. Usually means like rebuke your fellow. V'lo tisa alav chet, and do not bear an avera upon you. So the pasuk has three subjects: don't hate, give rebuke, and don't bear an avera. And the Rishonim try to understand, like, what is this pasuk speaking about, and what's the relationship between the three subjects here. So the Ramban here, and that's the final source, the Ramban, says a beautiful explanation that's very, very important and very relevant to our subject of obstructions. And it's where I underlined it, where it says V'yomar HaKasuv in the bottom. There's a third source here, V'yomar HaKasuv. Pasuk says, Al tisna es achicha b'levavecha, don't hate your brother in your heart. Means what? Ba'asosu lecha shelo kertzoncha. When a person does something that you don't like, it wasn't what you wanted, don't bear hatred in your heart to someone that does something that you don't like. Aval, but what? Tochichenu. Now, tochichenu is the word tohochacha. It really means to show something. Like in Hebrew, nochach means facing, which means you take that thing and you let them see it. So the word for rebuke is not a good translation. It really means let the person see it. Let them see the truth.